welcome to episode 23 of the Silver Savage podcast. This episode is brought to you by Masada Tactical. With everything going on these days, you cannot afford to not take safety and security seriously. Masada Tactical has been training civilians, law enforcement, military, healthcare systems, and corporate security professionals since 2007. This is the time to invest in your own safety. Check out Masada Tactical for self-defense classes, tactical firearms training, or medical and trauma care certifications. Check out training.masadatactical.com and use the code SILVERSAVAGE10, one word, to get 10% off when you sign up. I am very excited to have with us on the show today Sean Coldiron. I will post his full bio on the notes for the show, but suffice to say that Sean is a former Ranger, was a CBP agent, and a team member and a leader of the BORTAC unit. I met Sean a few years back. We teach in a lot of the same conferences, and we hit it off, and I realized that everybody can benefit from talking to this guy. In this episode, we discuss everything from security issues on the border to leadership issues that law enforcement faces and a lot more. As you'll hear in the episode, we did get together at the OTOA conference this past week. This actually drops just after, where we also had the opportunity to talk about other things from suicide bombers to religion and many, many more. And that just made it clear that we'll have to have him on the show again soon. But here's our chat with Sean Coldiron.
Cheers. I'm enjoying a IPA out of Belching Beaver, whatever.
I love when beavers belch.
Yeah, gotta love beavers.
Well, my IPA is an 11% juicy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
11%. Plus the whiskey that I'm finishing off.
Wow, double fisting. I like
we
that.
have juicy beavers. Love it. All right, Sean, you actually you're in luck. We have not just Steve that's over there by himself, but I have Paul here with me.
Hi, Paul.
We happen to be in Georgia teaching, and
oh, really?
Paul is with me, so we pulled him in. So Paul is a former crayon eater as well. He's a Marine, and then he was with policing for 21 years and did a lot of things that go bang. He's an explosive guy, so
sweet.
It should figure it'll be fun. Let me just did I spell your name right? Yes, did I spell your name correct?
Yes, sir, you did.
Right. Sean, I'm Steve, by the way, because BK doesn't introduce to her.
I did say Steve. I said Steve is by himself. He's the ugly one sitting by himself.
Yes, my friend.
No, let me say that. You have the coolest last name.
Oh, no, thanks. It's actually rare in the United States. You'll find more of them the further east you go, like Kentucky or Tennessee area around there, West Virginia. No, it's actually an anglicized version of German, Coltyson.
Oh, I see that now.
No. Neither did I.
I knew it.
Yeah.
So Sean, obviously you and I, by the way, we're recording just so you know, so just have fun with this. You and I met, I think the first time was at a GTOA conference.
Yes.
And we've been at a few others together. And kind of made it off. This last GTOA, last March, we had a chance to kind of hang out at the lobby and have a few drinks. And conversation was fascinating. I had a blast, kind of chit-chatting on life and terrorism and fixing world's problems. And we're like, you know what? I think other people will have fun listening to this. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
No, I appreciate it. It's an honor.
So, Sean, for those of our listeners that don't know you, can you give us a quick brief of where you come from, what you do? Who's Sean?
I'm Sean Coldiron. I'm a regular dude who took the same path a whole lot of other guys did. In 92, I was struggling in college, was going nowhere, and decided to join the military. I come from a family of military folks. My grandfather was in World War II. My dad was in Vietnam and the first Gulf War in the Air Force. And then
does that count?
What, the first Gulf War?
No, the Air Force.
No, the Air Force? No.
Depends what you do in the Air Force.
Yes. I
will say we have a lot of friends in the Air Force. I just like picking on them. And
well, I don't mess with my dad too much because he was with the A-10s for most of his career. So You know, they
Those all
supported
bona
us.
fide.
Yeah. So, and then and I decided to go Army. I'd watched Apocalypse Now like a million times, and I wanted to be like Captain Willard. So I started like doing research on the LERPs, and I'm like, who are these Ranger dudes? And that's what I went into. So I was active duty for 6 years, got out after I got married, and then had applied for a bunch of different agencies. And one of the most unique ones was the Border Patrol. I was actually here like a year of my active duty time was with the National Guard running a reconnaissance element. And we were supporting a drug mission in Arizona. And I was watching these dudes in OG 107 uniforms snooping and pooping and throwing flashbangs at horse loads. And I'm like, who are those dudes? And so I'm like, well, I want to do that. And so I applied for the Border Patrol. Continued to go to school for about a year. I was trying to finish up school while I was still on active duty on my last year. And then the Border Patrol called me first, and the rest is history. I entered on service or on duty with the Border Patrol in 1998 in Tucson Sector in Arizona. And I spent my entire career there. I started at a little station, Wilcox Station. It was for the Border Patrol agents out there that are listening, they can understand this. I went to a station that originally was what they call a retirement station. It was a very small station with 8 senior dudes, and 18 trainees showed up in a matter of a year out of the academy. So the amount of trouble that we got into was off the charts. Learn as you go.
Oh, so define trouble.
Just making a lot of mistakes. You learn a lot in the academy, but all law enforcement officers can relate to this. What you learn in the academy doesn't always relate to the streets. And so you have to fumble around and you have to fall flat on your face a few times. I've had my ass handed to me by an old time rancher on the side of the highway a few times, who probably knew a little bit more about his civil liberties than I did as a young, agent and what authorities I had. So you learn a lot. But what I learned there too was, we would jump dope by yourself. You would jump large groups of illegal aliens by yourself. It was not uncommon for me to jump a group of 40 to 60 by myself. So when you talk about having to handle business on your own, because your backup's 40 minutes away, 45 minutes away, you have to do those things. We didn't have the technology we do today. It was, your gun belt, whatever you carried, shotgun, AR platform, and your flashlight and your wits. That was it. I mean, it was like old school, legit cowboy kind of stuff. You just went out there and just did your thing. So
we're gonna get back into that, Sean, but let me stop you for a second. You talk about the old school mentality and the gear we had. I feel a lot of that wits you talk about is kind of lost on the new generation of law enforcement because they rely on technology instead of that wits and common sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a challenge for me after I left the tactical unit and went back into patrol for a year. It was a challenge for me to be a leader in all that because you have to find unique and innovative ways to lead and mentor because they're so reliant on aircraft, so reliant on the technology that's on the ground now. Versus us, it was cut sign, jump out, and try to determine, how far behind you are on that sign, and then get after it. You know what I mean? And sometimes you lost, and then you won. You know what I mean? And the wins were always, you learned a lot from both sides of the spectrum. And then plus the criminal element changed too. When I first got in there, especially with the aliens, it was a game. I mean, quite honestly, it was a game. The old timers can relate to some of the days back then is you could pull over a load of aliens and I'd fill up my truck and I'm sitting there waiting on somebody to come help me. And I'm still watching traffic and they'll point out the next load. And they'll laugh when I pull them over. And then I don't have enough room for everybody, so I just tell the driver, follow me to the station. And he would do that. And they'd all laugh. It was all a game. And then around 1999, 2000, just before I went to selection, it changed. A lot of the game bangers out of Phoenix, Arizona, started coming down and running loads. A lot of Cubans started getting involved in running aliens instead of just dope. And the Cubans were a real problem for us, for about 3 years down there. So,
and, it's crazy. I don't think people realize that frustration because, unlike local law enforcement, where we're geared, and all of us here are LEOs. Politics obviously has a large influence in what we do, but more so with you guys down south. It's like from one day to the next, you're either detaining and arresting or detaining and releasing, and it's crazy because people have this misconception that border problems are just on the border. And I worked undercover operations for a certain federal agency for a while, whose abbreviations happen to be HSI. So I worked with a lot of you guys, and I was doing buys and not to break any non-disclosure agreements in this state of Maryland with dudes that had ties to cartels over the border. Mm-hmm. And we'd arrest guys, when I worked gangs and whatnot. And like you said, it was a game and a joke to them. They'd look us right in the face, because we turn them over to ERO and the, enforcement removal operations, all those guys. They look us right in the face and say, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And lo and behold, these dudes were back in 2 weeks.
For the record, I will say Steve is Puerto Rican, and I'm not sure he's here legally. So, Sean, if you want to,
hey, I'm the good kind of can. We came on an airline.
Yeah, that's a common mistake. You start telling Puerto Ricans they're not citizens, and you better get ready to throw down, man.
And look, don't get me started on that history because Puerto Ricans were tortured, killed, and blah blah blah. But whatever.
So Sean, you talk about how it was back then, right in the early 2000s and so forth. Is that about the time you went to selection?
Correct.
You spent all of it just doing patrol?
No, I spent the majority of my career with Border Patrol Tactical Unit. And so I went through selection for our regional unit. I'll kind of give a history of that in a few. I went through selection in 2000 in Tucson. So at the time, for the listeners out there, because if you do any research on BORTAC itself, there's not much out there, which I've always glad for, because the criminal element's always doing research on everything, and I hate Instagram for that. But that's going down another rabbit hole later. So Tucson Sector and San Diego were formed the same year that the Border Patrol Tactical Unit nationally was formed, because we were established by the plank holders of BORTAC. So we had the same standards. Our selection standards are the same as a national unit, but a lot of the other regional teams did not have the same standards. So a lot of them would go through the national unit selection, BORTAC. But the difference was in those days was BORTAC at the regional level for Tucson and San Diego were full-time teams, while BORTAC national wasn't. It was on an on-call basis. So if they had a mission down south in South America or Central America, they put out feelers of who's available to go on this mission. They do a pre-deployment prep for about 4 weeks and then launch for a 90-day to 120-day deployment.
Hey, Sean, for our listeners, because not all of them are vets and law enforcement like us, because law enforcement's always considered too militarized and overly aggressive. If you can explain what was the reason for BORTAC, and I know you'll get into BORSTAR too, because a lot of people don't understand what they are and what they exist, which is the preservation of life. But what was the need for BORTAC? You're on the border and you need this elite team. Why? Because I don't think people know why.
No, it was initially launched, and I don't mean to interrupt you. It was initially launched because of the Cuban refugee crisis in the prisons. We had like 3 different uprisings, one in Louisiana and a couple other places. And at the time, because we were the Border Patrol was part of the Department of Justice during those days, all the way up until post 9/11. So we just leaned on FBI HRT. So they realized that the Border Patrol needed to have a specialized tactical unit to handle those kinds of scenarios, and then some other high risk missions. And so shortly after they were formed, the biggest bulk of their missions in the heyday back in the 80s and early 90s was Operation Snowcap in support of DEA combating the Colombian, cartels. So during the days of Pablo Escobar and the Cali cartel and those guys, they were going down there and with the host nation dealing with all the coke labs and whatnot, destroying them. So that's the history of BORTAC in a nutshell.
I always find amazing the lack of understanding of people of law enforcement, American law enforcement operating in other countries. I mean, the fact that NYPD had people in Iraq, the fact that Customs and Border Protections has people in Latin America. I think they think they're confined to the United States and not recognize the vast reach they have.
Oh, absolutely correct. Once, during GWAT, we had BORTACers operating in Iraq, Afghanistan, a couple other countries. We currently have folks working in some of the, Balkan states right now. We have both BORTAC and BORSTAR operating there with doing joint ventures. A lot of these missions that we do are it's about as close as you can get to like the Special Forces Foreign Internal Defense mission, what they call the FID missions. It resembles that very closely. So we'll train them on counter border operations, some counterinsurgency stuff, and then advise them on a couple real world operations. And then we'll come back and we sustain that for a determined amount of time. And a lot of that was reinforced. I think it was in 2006, 2008, they began the Western Hemisphere Initiative, which is pushing our borders away from just our landlocked border here, but doing 3 layers. So it was more of a strategic approach to combating our smuggling problems and cross-border proliferation.
So getting a little bit maybe ahead of ourselves, but sticking to that topic, when you talk about the smuggling cartels, right, and that smuggling operations, that's not the only thing you guys come about. When you and I talk, we talked about terrorism, talk about some other things that are coming through the border right now. How big of an issue is that for our listeners, and what is CBP?
Don't scare them too bad.
Well, that's what we're here for, steer things up.
Yeah, and it's because when I was on the task force, I had access to the OTM list, which is other than Mexican. No, that's literally what it stood for. Because obviously the nexus is to the Mexican border, so anything other than a Mexican, it was considered OTM. And I'll let Sean take it over. But when I saw that, it scared the crap out of me. So I can't imagine guys like Sean who are working right now and what they're facing down there.
Well,
take it away, Sean.
So when you're talking about that, we're limited in the amount of information we can obtain. Right. So I will give props to DHS and the Border Patrol as they've really spent a lot of money on their intelligence infrastructure. In Tucson, we had one of the largest intelligence fusion centers across the country. But the problem is that when it comes to counterterrorism domestically, we're tied in with the FBI. They run that aspect. Now, there's elements of HSI and ATF and DHS that do handle that, but I got to be careful what I say and how we get some of that. But it was a struggle for years, right? And so a lot of times we would get. So I try and tell folks to this day, I've done a ton of narco-terrorism style operations, but like, I can count on one hand how many actual counterterrorism missions I've done in around the border. But they were always tied with the FBI. It was their information, their case. So, and it's a struggle with the FBI because they compartmentalize things until it's time for you to know.
So let's take away the agency-specific element, right? FBI, CBP, HSI, and all those alphabet soup acronyms, right? What I want our listeners to understand, and you and I discussed it, and I'm not attached to any federal agency in the United States, so I have no problem saying, but I've seen intel reports of tents on the American side of the Mexican border where the materials in the tent were not necessarily illegal immigration, but more of jihadist, type of flair to them, right?
Yeah,
So,
I can confirm that. I can confirm
okay.
that.
So people don't understand. Listen, I'm from Israel, obviously, and we have a huge issue with tunnels, right? Those terrorists are infiltrating Israel. They're smuggling weapons, through those tunnels, and it's the same technologies,
right,
we're finding on the southern border. So there's obviously a nexus. There's a time there. Whoever supports Hamas and Hezbollah over there is supporting the narco terrorism over here, right? So how much is that a threat that the American citizenship is not aware? They're just oblivious to, right?
Ignorance is bliss.
Yes, there is, and this is where
you're making them uncomfortable, BK.
Sorry, Sean, you can tell me to shut up.
No, you're 100% correct. The issue that we have is it goes layers deep. If you really look at the intelligence and where a lot of this originates is once it come overseas, most of them are not just going into Mexico. They're going to an area in South America. And there they can access legal passports, visas to move around freely until they get to the United States. And those individuals there are paying so much money that they're hiring the smugglers that are the best. So their odds, their percentages of success are super high. So yes, there's time to time that we will catch them. And, then that makes the news and all this. But yeah, is there a whole bunch of guys that infiltrated into the United States that we probably don't know anything about? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Without a doubt.
I watch Sicario. I know a doubt plays out. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm kind of switching topics here real quick. Not necessarily because, and I know I'm assuming you've worked with them because I'm sure they existed while you were still on. So, like you, I applied for CBP back in the day. I figured I'm bilingual.
2008, and I got accepted to CBP. And I'll tell you why I applied to CBP specifically, because I did a lot of research. I was working for the Maryland Police Training Commission at the time. And I was looking to federal agencies. I wanted to get into actual federal law enforcement. And the only reason I went with CBP is you guys teach the one class that nobody else does. And it's the one thing I never learned, and that's human tracking. And I wanted to learn human tracking. I wanted to hunt people the way people should be hunted. And I got accepted. And then that's when I went for divorce. My daughter was born. It was a big shit show and never happened. And one of my regrets in life is not going. I think CBP does not get the credit that it deserves.
There goes my story.
And there we go. All right.
I originally applied CBP, but then I found out about CBP Air and Marine, and I didn't realize it was a separate almost entity, but you guys work very close together. And I was in the process for the Marine side. I actually out of Puerto Rico. I guess they stereotype me being Puerto Rican. But like BK, I met my wife, who's looks like Elsa from Frozen and in White as Snow, and she'll die of skin cancer if I move to Puerto Rico. So I had to get out of the process. But CBP Air and Marine, I've seen air and addiction agents. I had an opportunity to see them in action. Those are some BA dudes right there from what I've seen. Just kind of getting your opinion on that. Because I know, being BORTAC, you're high speed, low drag too, but these guys are jumping out of helicopters doing air assault kind of things.
That would be us.
And that's why I'm asking.
Now I'm not knocking the CBP Air and Marine guys. They're top notch dudes. There's a lot of, especially on the air side, there's a handful of former 160th guys that are pilots as well. We had a couple of them flying for us in Tucson. but there's a lot of top-notch dudes. They are, and their crews are good as well. But but that kind of stuff that you're talking about, that's probably us.
Yeah. Okay. So they're not. When you talk about an air interdiction agent, and this is for our listeners for their own education too. Someone who might be seeking a career. It's not exactly what it sounds like. If they want that high speed, low drag, they need to be on the ground, BORTAC kind of style kind of thing.
Correct. So the air interdiction agent is actually the pilots.
No kidding.
Yeah. And now their crews, like on the Hawks and whatnot, those guys, the backseaters, they have specialty training too. You know what I mean? And they'll do some of their own takedowns. But for the big ticket items, that's going to be BORTAC or another federal entity coming out of those.
Okay, and that's good to know.
So you guys mentioned BORSTAR. What's BORSTAR for our listeners?
Our search and rescue unit.
Okay, and you guys work very closely together, right?
Yes, we're under the same command. So the best way I could describe them, they're about as close as you can get to pararescue guys, as you can. Those dudes, they have their own selection course, which is pretty grueling. They have their own dive teams, austere medicine guys, paramedics. They're good dudes. They're really good dudes.
And do you guys work jointly? I would assume on some stuff.
Yes. So around 2007 or 8, we stopped training our guys to be medics. We just started leaning on. We hand selected guys from BORSTAR that wanted to be TAC medics, and then they roll out on every mission that we did, and be our medical side. So they're good dudes.
It's amazing that CBP does not get the credit that it deserves, considering the amount of work they do nowadays. Getting into politics real quickly, I mean, there's a lot of controversy going on regarding Border Patrol operations right now on the southern border. What's your take on that?
Oh,
yeah, I'm gonna need another beer.
I need a refill. Like you fall around. He's my bartender. Very good at this.
I'm appalled at what's going on, quite honestly. It's also why, it led me to retire in 19, because I saw where we were going. It has become a very risk-averse organization. And look, when you work for a federal agency, you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, in my leadership courses, I talk to everybody about every police organization in the United States is politically tied, because the sheriff is elected. The chief of police is typically appointed by and hired by the city council. So there's an agenda attached to all that, right? So, and then the nuances you have within the political environment will steer policing in whatever direction. It's no different for us on the federal side, because all of our key leaders, our senior leaders, all of our senior executives. So the secretary of DHS is a political appointee. Our CBP commissioner is a political appointee. And then those guys put into place their people who are going to work in, within the confines of their agenda and their policies, right? So, and then it just cascades down. And so it becomes quite stressful at times and a challenge. But it takes when a new administration comes in, it takes about 2 years for that to trickle down. You'll see some effects. This is the first time in the history of us getting a new president that I've seen anything like this, where executive orders were in violation, direct violation of federal law. And we're letting them get away with it. And that's what blows my mind. So what do you think the morale is going to be like with the guys and gals working on the border? They don't want to work. The supervisors and all those guys that have aspirations for, to move up in their careers, they're either going to fall in line or they're not going to do anything. Because
talk about the political climate.
Correct.
Texas being, their own nation, so to speak.
Amen.
Your experience or opinion about their view on border security and how they work with CBP on that. Is there any time that they're in concert, or are they always in an adversarial type position with the
they're always in concert on the ground. I'll tell you that right now. On the ground, they're always in concert. Now, what Governor Abbott, which I applaud all the time, and what's being reported, he's always, creating friction. He's not. I mean, there's some things that he's doing which complicates matters. But it's the right thing to do. The whole, because he's playing a fine game, which I love, is that he can't force people to do whatever, but he's finding loopholes in the federal law and what the state's power and authority is, and finding ways to exploit that.
Is and hold in fighting the problem?
It's super effective. Super effective.
It's unfortunate that has to happen, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't be at this point.
No.
We shouldn't.
Well, but the reality is, and again, I'm an outsider, I'm an immigrant, naturalized immigrant. Let me just make that clear. But I'm looking as an outsider, and the reality is the federal government is not there to dictate each state's, individual actions, right? So the fact that we have a governor, in Texas that's actually saying, okay, listen, this is what needs to get done, and he gets that done. It's a shame that he has to play the loophole, but that's what needs to happen. He's supposed to control that state. So, Sean, kind of veering away from politics for a little bit and making you a bit less uncomfortable. You left Border Patrol, and when I met you, you have Ironclad. You teaching a lot of leadership classes, you're teaching some other stuff. Tell us about that. How was the transition into the civilian world, the civilian training world, and what do you do now?
Can we circle back a little bit? Because in order for you to have context about Ironclad, I need to talk a little bit about my career with BORTAC.
Of course.
Because that's what set the stage for where I'm at today. So what a lot of people don't know is in Arizona, around 2006, we became the epicenter for the center of gravity for all the nation in terms of the amount of money and infrastructure that was being dumped into our state, into our sector, and the amount of violence we were dealing with. Because around 2006 is the first time that Chapo Guzman got captured. And so there was a power vacuum. So you had the Gulf Cartel, you had the dudes out of Tijuana, all starting to trying to wrestle control from the Sinaloans. So our border in Arizona is controlled, 90% of it is controlled by the Sinaloans. And so, what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just saying their names.
So there was a power vacuum. So a lot of violence was happening. And so a lot of that violence was dumping across the border. Because when they would ambush like military units or federal law enforcement on the Mexican side, when they broke contact, they'd come across the border because it was safer for them. Because they're not dumb. All of them know the second they cross over the border, they have constitutional rights. And so, but what happened was that there was this flux where we started having a bunch of gunfights. There was a National Park Service guy, Chris, that was murdered in it's south of Ajo, Arizona, between Yuma and Tucson or Nogales, Arizona. That was the catalyst of where we started, hey, we need to do something about this. And then they started wrestling for control in Nogales, which is a big tourist city. And I mean, there was like nightly gunfights going on, firefights going on.
And you don't hear about this at all.
No. And nobody was hearing about it. Not even in Tucson, where I live, 78 miles north of the border. They had no idea what was going on just 30 miles south of them.
Yeah. No, not to interrupt you, but even with me, when I worked HSI, we received an HSI agent who was working on the other side who was murdered and gunned down in Delaware. And this was, not too long ago, a few years ago. Not a word on the news. Not a word on the news about it.
Yeah, it's So in around 2008, we started having this problem, this new threat that started evolving. We called them rip crews, but there were dudes they started with doing home invasions for dope and money. Then they escalated to doing like full-fledged vehicle assaults in broad daylight in the cities, both Phoenix and Tucson. We had about a handful of running gunfights between Tucson and Phoenix of them trying to hijack loads. And then we had this new crew that started going out to the desert and started ripping loads there, ambushing dopers. And just leaving the bodies there, taking the dope and leaving. So it was a threat. We were starting to combat it a little bit. It was limited in what we were doing until we had linked at least probably 16 homicides in a 20 square mile region in these mountains. And there was probably more, but finally the chain of command is like, hey, you guys have to deal with this problem. Which was easy at the beginning because they were getting dropped off the highways with all their guns, their armor, and their kit and their supplies, and then step off into the mountains. And then we just hunt them in between. With our technology and the skills that we had, it was easy picking. Got into a handful of gunfights. It was good to go. We had, won every fight and, came out unscathed. And then these crews started evolving quickly. So instead of them coming off, getting dropped off with their stuff, they went into where they were establishing caches in the mountains. So they'd get dropped off at different places, change their routes on how they're infilling, recover their equipment, go hunt, and then come out different ways. And so it was a challenge for us as a unit. And so what we did was something that's super uncommon within law enforcement as a whole was I had just become our number 2 IC. I said, hey, I'm tired of us being responsive. We need to become proactive. So I have my own intelligence shop. I recruited more guys to support that. Plus, I established our recce detachment that was not just BORTAC guys, but also regular Border Patrol agents that we recruited that, different skills. I got a bunch of technology, technical intelligence collection technology that we needed to employ. Plus, the Predator was flying now. Plus, we had access to satellites and a whole bunch of fixed-wing ISR. And none of us really, we kind of used it, but we didn't really use it. So I started drinking through a fire hose, learning how to leverage all those assets. What kind of sensor packages do they have? What are the capabilities of the sensor packages? When I could use it, how I can task it. How are we going to put these cameras out? How are we going to get real-time intelligence? How are we going to get triggers? How can we act on it? So over a course of a year, we just started doing these things and learning as we went. The unique thing about that is that we used a model that JSOC was using to hunt Zarqawi between 05 and 07.
I was about to say that sounds very familiar with some of the special operations tactics used on the other side of the world. Correct.
So I've been fortunate in my career. I've known a lot of guys in different units. One of my best buddies worked, was an assaulter at the unit. So I talked to him quite often about that kind of stuff. And then he dropped some stuff on me. And plus, just ironically, I ran into a special forces guy that was a Border Patrol agent who did targeting both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm like, hey, man, how would you like to come work with us to run our intel shop? And he jumped at the opportunity, and we formulated a process that worked for us that was modeled after what they were doing in the Middle East. And it started to catch. And so what this story is leading towards is when we lost one of our teammates. So even as we evolved and we're becoming innovative and agile and adaptable, we did one thing wrong. We fell on a template. When the shit hit the fan and things were starting to cut, it happened so, the situation evolved so rapidly, caught our guys off guard, that they put a template on there and never expected the dudes to stand their ground and fight. So there you have it. You have an adversary that decided to exercise their vote, and it didn't go our way. We lost one of our guys. Yeah, they lost one of theirs, but at the end result was we lost one of ours. And that was the catalyst for Fast and Furious. That was the operation. And so, that's for another conversation. But
I was gonna say that's a rabbit hole that'll go really deep.
Yeah. So
hold on, but just for the sake of, because you'll be amazed how many of our listeners I think are not as
correct
in some of the political news, because this is, you're talking about 2 or 3 years old, if not a little more than that.
It's
And
more than that.
12 years.
that's when it started. But I think it really hit the fan. It wasn't that long ago. It was during the Trump administration that it actually hit the fan, right?
No.
No, it was before
Fast and
It
Furious
was
started.
Obama. Right, my bad. My bad.
Fast and Furious started under Bush, but it gained a lot of momentum under Obama.
So can you tell people real quickly, our listeners, what was that all about?
Fast and Furious was conducting an illegal operation where the ATF was allowing straw purchaser to purchase weapons on U.S. soil and let them walk across the border. In order, their justification was to track where it went to what cartels, so they can act on it.
And then the same weapons were being used in crimes.
Right.
Three agents, federal agents, have been killed by Fast and Furious guns. So, and it started. The first one was Brian, was our teammate, because 2 of the guns that were found at the scene were Fast and Furious guns. That's what started it.
How many gun purchases or sales were made? Do you have any idea?
Hundreds of thousands. It was going on for years.
Yeah, and we haven't recovered nearly any of them.
You're not going to.
Yeah, well,
look, we are talking like Barrett 50 cows.
Mm-hmm.
And who's not
a slew of weapons.
And who's not, doesn't think that those weapons at some point are going to find their way into harming American citizens.
I don't want to go down. We're going to go down a rabbit hole.
We just said the rabbit hole. We're not going down the rabbit hole. We just said we're not going snow. We're not going. We're not going. Wonderland here. Okay, we're not doing the whole. We're not taking the blue pill. We're not taking the blue pill. Okay.
No. All right. So Sean, you had those experiences at BORTAC. You had your teammate Brian. Paid the ultimate sacrifice. What happened after?
So because of that is that we reset as a team, and this leads to what I do now and how I teach with the leadership stuff, is that we realize that a lot of the common templates that were working for us have been working on solely because the adversary hadn't exercised their vote. So we reset, we looked at how we were doing things and said, look, we're going to, start focusing on solving the problem. We'll realize once we recognize what the problem is, what techniques and tactics we'll apply to solve that problem. And it just morphed over years and it became a passion of mine. And that's how we drove ourselves for years, that we were solely focused on initiative-based tactics. It didn't matter whether we were doing CQB, doing a vehicle interdiction, doing what when we do the counter scout missions, we call them strike missions. It didn't matter what we were doing. We applied the same principles and just solved the problem, and we'd figure it out. So that's kind of what led me to develop Ironclad Concepts and Solutions. Was I wanted to pass on those lessons learned, what worked with our operational environment, because what a lot of people don't realize is that our operational environment in Arizona was challenging. We have one of the top 10 biggest cities in the nation in our state, which is Phoenix. Plus, we have a secondary city, and both of them are hubs for trafficking and violence and all kinds of other criminal enterprises. And then our border region was 360 out of 364 miles, like over 300 is mountainous terrain, with peaks going up to almost 9,000 feet. So we deal with a lot of austere terrain. So our operational environment was challenging, and the scope of operations that we did is not common with most law enforcement teams. Because I can look at a law enforcement team and go, the bulk of your missions are probably going to be barricades, search warrants. That's probably going to fill 80% of your billet. And I'll get a thumbs up. For us, we're doing a rural interdiction to the next day doing a vehicle interdiction or a search warrant, or doing a PSD, or doing a strike mission, or supporting a buy bust operation or doing UC rescue. So there's this constant up and down of different things that we're doing. So we had to simplify things, how we're going to approach the problem, especially time sensitive stuff. When we're doing like some of our strike missions, those are trigger operations. The like hostage rescue, like we were not a team that did hostage barricades, but we've done a bunch of hostage rescues of being like aliens being held against their will. Like Steve knows, is familiar.
Yeah, I had the unfortunate, I don't want to say privilege of inadvertently getting involved in a rescue. I wasn't in the rescue physically, but let's just say a gentleman came into a police station and started that way, wanted to report a missing person. He couldn't speak English. I was working intelligence on the task force at the time, talked to him. Long story short, it led to your teams hitting a house somewhere in the border and rescuing a large portion of immigrants being held against their will, which was one of his relatives. And I'll tell you what, that guy became a long-lasting, most faithful CI I've ever had.
Yep.
Because of that.
Yep. So, Sean, you talk about taking very complicated tactical scenarios, right, which I'm familiar with those, and simplifying to concepts that are easy to digest, right? Because that's the idea, right? Paul has been listening to me all week. We're teaching defensive tactics here, but it's the same thing. It's principle-based. I cannot teach you katas. A fight is a dynamic situation, way too many variables. So remember principles. So you took those principles, simplified it enough to where the troop in the field can make a tactical decision, based on those principles. Am I roughly on?
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll talk about them right here if you want to.
If you want to, it's your business. So
look, I don't own this. You know what I mean? And that's what I tell guys all the time. I'm like, this is not information I've owned.
But you've lived it.
I've lived it. I've stolen stuff from dudes, if that's what you want to call it, and dudes steal stuff from me, you take it. I don't own it. I have nothing copyrighted. Only a few companies have stuff copyrighted.
Yeah, but I've always said you can have the greatest instructor in the world. If they haven't actually lived what they're preaching and done what they're preaching, they're useless. How can you truly justify the science behind something unless you've done it yourself? And you're one of those people, for our listeners, who have been there, done that, got the T-shirt, which I can't stop reading a shirt, and we can talk about that later.
I've been doing that for the last 48 minutes.
I want one. And we'll talk about the meaning behind it, if it's personal or whatever, but I'm loving that shirt. But yes, so go ahead with your ironclad concepts and the principles.
So I did a bunch of research over the years because, like you hear the same stuff over and over again. If you say, what are the principles of CQB? Surprise, speed, violence of action. No, that's not it. You know what I mean? If you look at every tactical law enforcement operation, you're going to have 5 base principles. First one is force superiority. You have to gain and maintain relative superiority. And the nuance with that is the longer time continues on, you're going to lose relative superiority. So what tools do you have available in order to gain and maintain? So if you're doing CQB and we get bogged down in a hallway or whatever, we can do a number of things. We can, use a banger. We can use, whatever tools that we have, port out a window. You know what I mean? The next one is mutual support. It starts at the buddy team level all the way up to the maneuver elements. So if you want to talk about like a search warrant, you have your main entry team, your assault team, who's supporting them. Mutual support is an inter-containment team. Who's supporting them? Depending on the environment you're in, if it's a 360-degree threat environment, well, I have another layer of containment focusing on supporting them. So, and the third one is control. We control time, control space, and we control people. So time, so that control, and force superiority or relative superiority are slaved together. Because if we're not controlling time or buying back time, we're losing relative superiority and it'll slip away from us. So, and then when we talk about space, especially in the CQB environment, or if I'm dealing with the vehicle interdiction, I have to control my space. Okay. And this is where I get frustrated when I'm seeing these teams that are buying into systems. I'm seeing them violate these principles because they learned something from somebody with some credentials who said this is the way to do it.
We've had this conversation many times.
Because it worked overseas or it worked over here. Well, dudes, man, it's not the same.
Yeah, look, we've had this argument.
Right,
so
John,
it's
you can't blame the team for that. It's the fact that there's a lot of instructors, and you and I can go a whole different rabbit hole on that. A lot of instructors that present themselves as experts on stuff they don't know shit about.
Right.
So
I'm with you on that.
Sure, I got a question for you. I just met you, and without hesitation, I'd follow you to war any day, especially wearing a shirt like that. So we've talked to gentlemen that also consult leadership, right? But more in the corporate sector. And although they can be synonymous, in the corporate sector, if you make the wrong decision, you're going to lose money. In our world, you're going to lose lives. 3 words. Give me 3 words in your opinion. And this is more for me, you know, as a leader myself of police officers and having led men and women in the Marines and the Army. 3 words to describe what you feel a leader is. What's your top 3 words?
Innovative. Agile. Well, agile and adaptable are
okay, so flexible.
2, right. And being see, it takes more than just 3.
I know, but give me your top 3. We know there's more. I'm just curious. What are your top 3?
Okay, so innovative, agile, and adaptable, and then being objective.
Being objective.
You know what? One thing that I was thinking about this question because we asked it in the past, and you know, I agree with you, Sean. I think those 3 are overly important. But with that agility and the ability to access information, make the right decision, there's got to be also a decisiveness. Right. I see a lot of leaders taking agility a little too far. What do you think about that? They're like, okay, there's this new piece of information. We're just going to change 180. Now we're going to change 180 back. Now we're going to go that way. And there's no continuity.
Yeah, I agree. You know, there's a time and place, and you have to frame the scenario. You know what I mean? Because when I was in 2IC, there's a few scenarios that I would run for a full unit, you know, our full mission profiles that I would tweak to make it a no-win situation. And dudes would get pissed. But it wasn't about them. I was testing 2 things. Number 1, are young leaders. Are they going to make a decision? Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, are they going to make a decision? And I'm not talking about a stupid decision like that, like, you know, let's go left when we should go right. It's kind of taking that tactical pause, assessing the situation. Are they falling back on standard operating procedures? Reset and go, right? Instead of just getting bogged down, trying to receive more information. Because it goes back to that principle. Hey, we got to control time. And the more I want to sit and receive more information in order to make a better decision, I'm giving up time. I lost my thought now.
That's okay. But to that point, while you regain your thought, wasn't there a general that said, I forgot, was it Patton that said, I'd rather execute now on 80% intelligence than wait and execute later on 100%?
Yes, a good plan executed, a quick plan executed now is better than a well thought out plan executed later.
Yep. So, and with that being said, is that you have, so in law enforcement, that is the crux. And it creates so much friction. Is they're always trying to seek more information. Now, you want to talk about the counterterrorism world. So in the law enforcement world for crime, we always like to get to the 90% solution, right? Because we're worried about liability, collateral damage, all these other things, right? But in responding to a terror event, you have to be comfortable with the 80% solution, with limited intelligence, and really that you trust and you're confident in the processes and what you guys are capable of. Go interdict, go intercede. You have to. And that's why Americans, for the most part, law enforcement fail or struggle with counterterrorism operations because they have to, because a threat in the counterterrorism world is different than a crime threat. Always is. It's not going to always present itself in the same manner because we're looking for guns, knives, things are going to hurt us, which we'll talk about later when we start talking about the suicide bombing stuff. So,
well, but that's
I know you're going to go there at one point.
Because you and I went there before, but this is the thing, right? So we can go there now. The reality is that Americans haven't dealt with it enough. And unfortunately, I feel, and again, that's me as an outsider, and specifically someone coming from Israel, where we deal with it on a daily basis almost, right? The reality is America is going to go through, that death by 1,000 cuts, right? They're going to have to experience again and again and again to finally, that culture is going to have to change here. There's a social acceptance that this is not going to happen here. Or if it's going to happen, it's going to be something like 9/11, right? The reality between 9/11 and today, we experience a lot of things as Americans. Most of them are not known to the general population, right? But we are experiencing them. And that evolution from the law enforcement side is going to have to happen eventually.
You look at barricade situations, looking at that. How many times, Steve, have you sat outside of a door with a dead person on the other side waiting for a phone contact to occur?
Yes.
Somebody's afraid to make the decision to breach.
Yeah. It's like I heard the best saying ever, and it was the most committed wins. All right. And unfortunately, it wasn't a great war philosopher. It was in the movie The Siege with Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis. But which was a terrorism movie, but they were right. The most committed is going to win, and you got to have that aggressive response. But like you said, BK, unfortunately, we haven't experienced that as a nation. Or well, we have, but because it's so diluted, it's so just, suppressed, only people like Sean down on the border and his colleagues that are living it day by day, and those of us who are living it day by day can speak empirically on it, until the average person can, go down to the border, and see for themselves. They're not going to know, and it's unfortunate not to bring politics back into it. But I think that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of politicians that won't go to the border, because they don't want to see the truth and see the reality of what has to be done.
Until you have a low-level attacker somewhere in a mall downtown Baltimore or in, walking down DC. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
No. So you teed up what I was getting ready to say. Is when you talk about active shooter or active killer, whatever the definition we're going to use today, that's a problem I have. We try to put definitions on it and we try to frame it. It's a terrorist event. Okay. Yes, it's not going to meet the federal definition of a terrorist organization. We get that.
Political agenda.
Right. But if we look at an event like that and we break it down to the most simplistic, basic, operation that we're going to do, it's a movement to contact. We're going to close with and destroy the enemy. Okay. We have to act immediately. We can't sit around and come up with a plan. Okay. So if we understand the baseline of techniques, all right, and the principles, okay, boom. I understand the concept. Okay. I got to go find that dude and I got to stop him from killing people. And the problem that we have when we start dealing with the terrorism piece, terrorism versus crime, is we will ask students all the time, what's our goal? Save everybody. No, it's impossible. It's to mitigate massive loss of life.
Fine.
Okay, so go ahead.
Sorry, Sean, I will argue one thing. So, and I agree with you 100%. We just talked yesterday, active assailant response. And I told him time equals lives. And as far as you're concerned, I actually have them splatter out different events, right? And I put them into quadrants. Yeah. The classical active assailant, terrorism, complex coordinated attack, street level crime. And I asked him, from your response option, does it matter? And the answer is flat out no. There's a threat, and you need to move to that threat and neutralize the threat, right? But the problem I have in America, and not to keep bragging on America, I love this country, but the reality is the whole idea of active assailant response is flawed because we're concentrating on the reactive approach rather than proactive approach. How about we concentrate on active assailant prevention? I think that's a better approach.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and that's a problem we have. Because it's like, even going back to our stuff, we stopped calling it tactical tracking. It's a movement to contact. That's what it is. Okay, we're just using a different formation, a different technique. We're putting a tracker in there or a canine. You know what I mean? But still, the act of me closing with, locating, and dealing with that threat doesn't change. Doesn't change at all. Okay, the techniques, the tactics I apply change on the terrain or how many threats I'm looking for. If we're hunting 6 dudes that are together, that's going to be a little bit different.
See, that's just, it's my fear that what has to happen and what level of violence and death and carnage and mayhem has to happen before everyone wakes up, you know? So I have a t-shirt that my wife doesn't like me wearing to church. You know, it says on the back, not as cool as your shirt, but it says on the back, you know, I'm not the hero you wanted, I'm the monster you needed. But there's some reverence to that, you know, like it's the unfortunate truth, but nobody wants to say, yeah, this is what's happening and this is what has to be done. You know, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of going to Israel with BK. He took me there, and it was an eye-opening experience, you know, especially doing that one day of active shooter response, as opposed to what I've done on my tag team and as a 22-year law enforcement veteran. I mean, it was completely different, but very effective, very aggressive, and very eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
And Steve, I would argue we already had that big incident. We had it.
We have.
11. We can't ignore it, right?
Right. But what I'm saying is, because of that, how much worse does it have to get? You
So I
know,
don't think it's gonna be another big event
before they unleash the BKs and the Shans. Well, maybe not you, Paul, because you're too pretty. And you know, these are savages to go out there and you know, clean house. You know.
Well, to kind of echo what BK said a minute ago from the explosive side of things, that device that detonated in Nashville not too long ago. People are all, oh, it's terrible. Thank God that death was minimized with that through the response. Metro did a really good job. But then it came out that, oh, he was questioned previously about that. And everyone's like, well, you should have done something. These are the same fuckers that are complaining you don't have the right. And so you look at where's that disconnect. And like you said, death by 1,000 cuts. How many cuts?
Yeah.
Until we're like, I'm tired of getting cut and we're going to take the knife out of their hand.
Well,
We're going down the rabbit hole.
But when it hits your home, that's when it's going to change, right? When unfortunately somebody's going to be too close to home, and that's a decision maker that can change things around, right?
Yeah. It takes for something catastrophic, you know, because I mean, honestly, and I'm very honest with the classes I teach when I go into this, is that we learn the hard way too. You know, we had to lose a guy for us to reset. We were changing already, but it really honestly took us to lose one of our own guys to go, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're not doing this right. We don't have the right approach to doing what we're doing. And we changed.
Yeah.
Holy, but unfortunately, what I'm seeing now is, you know, even, you know, my own guys, you know, they're starting to slide backwards. Why? Because the guys aren't there anymore. There's only a few that are still there that were there when all that went down. It's all new guys, and we all get sucked into that same whirlpool, you know, of like, it always takes something catastrophic for Americans. Unfortunately, it always takes something catastrophic for us to go, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. And then give it a couple of years and we'll be right back to, you know, doing what we do.
Right. So Sean, so obviously we understand the motive of what drove you to teach and share that knowledge, you know, your background and experiences, Brian, and so forth. So you started Ironclad, and what's your mission right now? What are you doing with Ironclad? Who are you teaching?
We're all over the country right now, which is a fortunate thing. We've got a variety of different classes. Doing a hostage rescue course for up in the Detroit area here. It was supposed to be this month, got pushed back to September, but even better because they want more days. So, which instead of us trying to condense it into a short period of time, we're having a full session with those guys. A couple of CQB classes. I'll be in Chattanooga. I'll be up in Ohio. We're doing 2 blocks of response to complex coordinated attacks for Collier County in Florida.
Let me stop you for a second, because that's fine, because that just came up. I'm the sergeant of the Special Operations Response Team on the EMS side in a major metropolitan area in Maryland. And I just mentioned that as big as that jurisdiction is, we have never had a true drill for a coordinated complex attack. And I don't know of any agency that truly did a true, not just, okay, we're going to start an ICS, an incident command center, and we're going to call it, okay, we we dealt with a CCA, with a complex coordinated attack. Like literally bringing different police agencies and EMS and fire and command and emergency management and dealing with multiple events going simultaneously. Because I don't think anybody's ready for that.
No, and that's one of the reasons that Collier contracted us. Actually, I'm bringing a guy with me out of your backyard out of Howard County, who's coming down with me to teach it. And
I wasn't invited. I'm just going to throw it out.
You know,
Yeah,
those guys in Howard's are a bunch of sissies, man. They just patrol a bunch of rich people. In my county, why not? We get it done. I'm just saying.
Wow.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sure he's a good guy.
No, he is. He's a great dude. But it's on the leadership perspective because they're trying to get that ball rolling with them. So most of the stuff we're talking about is, what's required in terms of that dynamic situation of how you're going to manage the flow and continuity of information. What should your lines of effort be? Your priorities of effort and the priorities of work should be. And not chasing the wrong problems down a rabbit hole. It's been introducing a problem framing process that I stole from the U.S. Marine Corps, by the way, years ago. I just refined it.
Stick figures.
It is in crayon. It's only in 3 colors.
But it's simple and easy to understand at all levels.
Yeah. But yeah, so I actually stole that process for them. And just applied it to the law enforcement tactical world. I kind of trimmed off some fat and played around with it because I really liked it because most teams do it and most leaders do it. It's just not formalized for you to stay and remain focused on the right problem. So we introduced that. And then we do a bunch of different debriefs from overseas and domestically. So I've studied Mumbai, I've studied Nairobi attacks, I've studied quite a few of them. It's, going all the way back to the Beslan incident. I've studied everything of just like, wow, you know what I mean? How do you deal with that? Like, if you look at Mumbai, could you imagine that an attack like that with 10 dudes, 5 different cells, 2-man teams, but have a robust command and control node like they did?
Right.
That's going to put a hurting on the city here.
And something in Paris, right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you're looking at what, 2017, right? Or was it? Yeah, 17.
Yep.
The November attacks, right?
Yep.
At Bataclan Theater and the soccer stadium. Yep.
And it's amazing how we know that. Listen, for all intents and purposes, 9/11 was a complex coordinated attack.
Absolutely.
Right. But people forget that. That's what frustrates me, and I'm sure you deal with the same frustration. The reality is that we had opportunities. I often refer to the Mandalay Bay shooting as a complex coordinated attack because if you listen to the dispatch calls, there are multiple events being called simultaneously, and there's no centralized approach to it. And that is, we had opportunities to learn, and we still dragging our feet.
And here's the thing, that unfortunately, again, because we put definitions to things, and when we say complex coordinated attack, we think of multiple attacks happening. So in my county, which I won't name because I don't have permission to do so, but my institution, we were when I was on the SWAT team, we responded to an incident. All right. In the process of responding to the incident, our command vehicle gets into a serious accident on a major highway and causes a significant distraction in assets, as you would say. It became a multi-event type thing where we had assets stretched so thin we could not properly respond to the accident. We could not properly respond to this barricade, and then other things were happening as well. So we can take this knowledge, this leadership, this empirical knowledge of multiple coordinated attacks and articulate it into the everyday multiple events happening. But unfortunately, because we put those definitions, some agencies might say, "Oh, we don't want that. That's too militaristic or too rough and stuff like that."
Right.
So
Steve, I got a question for you. Do you put into your planning process now that what happens if you have an accident on your way to your barricade or operation?
I mean, I'm not on the team anymore, but I always got a plan for something.
They should. That's the bottom line, Sean. So I'll put you in touch with this agency later.
Good luck. Um, but anyway.
So Sean, sounds like you're doing well and things are picking up, which I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
I certainly enjoy hanging out with you at these conferences and learning from you and having these conversations.
Brother, I learned from everybody, man.
Right.
I'm still a student. I have such a passion for this. I love the conversations we've had going back to the very first time we met. You know what I mean? I've enjoyed it because, man, there's so many ways to skin a cat. You know what I mean? And dudes come from different operational environments, and I just I can sit there forever and talk.
And I'm like you. When I teach a DT instructor course, for example, I always reprint the book, because I'll teach a class this week and I'll learn something from a student. Like, you know what? That makes sense to me more than what I've done. And if we collectively, as a community, law enforcement, military, don't evolve, we're going to start losing this war, right? So, So we need to keep evolving, keep learning from each other. Nobody has it perfect. And the bottom line is we have to listen to others and say, okay, this makes sense.
And that's why whenever I teach, whether it's a weapons class, a fighting class, the first thing I say is, I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to share my knowledge. And then I follow up with, and I'm here to learn as much from you as you are from me. Because I don't believe in the word expert. Everything evolves rapidly, and we're not going to be hermits. We all have to rely and learn from each other. And I think that's what differentiates instructors like all of us with those, like you mentioned earlier, Sean, where, I did this, I did that, I earned this, so do as I say, kind of thing. But again, that's another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What I really want to know is, does that shirt have significant meaning to you, or is it just a cool shirt?
So Wesley, for the listeners, the ones that are now watching this on YouTube right now, okay, what does the shirt say?
It says "Comida chingona." So I'll give the G-rated version of it. It means badass food. So
right, are you the badass food?
No. Here, I'll turn.
That's what I'm getting at.
Google Translate will tell you.
What's on the back? I can't read. I need my glasses.
Is that a restaurant?
So there's a cafe in Central Phoenix in the ghetto. Food. Yeah, and so she makes the most amazing food ever.
And that's the name of the restaurant?
No, it's a Barrio Cafe is the actual name of the restaurant.
Oh man, that would have been a better name.
I know, but I saw this shirt. I'm like, so my wife bought it for me.
Hey, Sean, I might have to hit you up outside the show, and you're gonna have to send me one of those shirts because it rocks.
Yeah,
I'm a size medium. Just throwing it out there.
Size girl.
So Sean, just so we don't keep you online for 2 hours, and like we say, a lot of our guests, it's been, this whole podcasting thing is kind of new for Steve and I, and we're having a blast with it. And a lot of this, we found out that an hour and a half is just not enough time. We're gonna have to have you again.
Oh no, forget having him again. We're gonna leave the Howard County guy behind. Me and you are gonna come up there and help Sean out, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Are you gonna be at OTOA?
Yes.
So we'll be there in 3 weeks.
Awesome.
But that aside, so one thing I always like asking our guests, for our listeners, we like having these soul podcasts is for savages, for people that are still looking to learn, improve, so forth. So from a physical standpoint, physical skills, I've seen you wear the tactical gains shirts a lot. So I know you still compete and do stuff like that, much like Steve and myself. What else do you do to keep yourself kind of still in shape?
So I work out every single day. I'm still, I don't know what to call it. It's a functional fitness. I still PT. Sometimes my younger boys, they still give me a hard time. Some of them don't. Actually, my younger ones don't even want to work out with me because they know they're gonna probably puke somewhere in there. But I still try and push myself all the time. Because I look at it from this perspective. I'm out there with SWAT guys daily, and especially when I teach leadership courses and I talk about being disciplined, fitness carries over into, mental agility and things like that. I'm like, I have to look the part. You know what I mean? And plus,
yes,
like we all know, it became a way of life a long time ago. Just, maintaining a high level of fitness, and it keeps my stress down, You talk about maintaining good mental health. You know, I don't care who you are. If you've done law enforcement or the military for all those years, you carry baggage. You carry a lot of baggage. So fitness for me is what, at the end of the day, when I'm done, the things that are still on my mind, those are the important things that I'm going to focus on. And that's what I do. So,
amen.
And I still shoot all the time. So I spend way more money on shooting on bullets right now than I even want to admit.
You're doing that kind of shooting.
Good night. I need to
just prioritizing. That's awesome, Sean. I know Steve always likes finishing with putting a guest on the hot seat and asking them some questions.
But the three questions?
but,
I did some research.
They're getting it now. They're on to me.
but let me ask you this before he does, because I forgot with some of our more recent guests, and I hate that I did. But if people want to get in touch with you, they want to get some of Coldiron's classes, they want to just touch base with Sean, where should they reach out to you?
They can go on our website, ironclad-cs.com, or follow us on Instagram, ironclad_CS. So give us a like, follow us. My wife, my marketing manager, is sitting there waving a sign at me right now.
You can bring it in. I love your wife.
I'm following you right now. I'm following you right now, Sean.
Yeah,
I'm on it.
I don't want to hang out with you. I like hanging out with your wife. She brings she's a lot more fun with than you.
Oh, she is.
What was the Instagram handle?
Ironclad_CS. Charlie Sierra.
We follow it. Masada Tactical follows it. So if you guys go on Masada Tactical, you can certainly find Ironclad as well.
Concepts and Solutions, right?
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. Cool. Sean, I'm going to let Steve take it.
All right, Sean, I'm going to go easy on you because I really, really like you. I can't say that too loud because BK gets jealous. So you were a Ranger. And you actually were a Ranger because you served in the 75th.
Yes.
And you were a sniper. So your three questions, I'm a military history major by trade, are going to be based on those two things. All right. So I'm giving you a chance to soak it in. And you know what? BK, Paul, they have no idea what questions I asked. So he opened up another beer for this one. I love it. I'm going to let you phone a friend. All right. So we got new rules. All right. You got Common Core rules, so you can be as close to the right answer, and you can phone a friend.
Hold on, let me turn on Google.
No Google. Your first question is a 75th Ranger or Ranger question in general, all right, dating back to World War II. Before they were Rangers, where did the concept of the Rangers? Where did they come from? What were they that they turned them into Rangers?
Merrill's Marauders.
So it goes before that. Before they were a special operations unit.
You're talking about in World War II.
So just
prior to World War II.
Prior to World War II, before they were Rangers, what were they? What unit did they take to turn into Rangers?
Does that go back to like Roger Rangers or something like that?
No, because
it's more simple than that. It is actually, when I learned this, I was like, that's pretty funny.
You're confusing me, but I know like the 5307th composite unit was Merrill's Marauders. That is where we get our lineage from. But prior to World War II,
your lineage is Rangers. But before they were Rangers, before they were actual Rangers,
you stumped me on this one.
So they were corn-fed backcountry artillerymen who transported their equipment on mules. And the reason they used them, because they were used to mountains, high elevation, and they were all strong and had endurance. So they became the test subjects to become your special operations, quote unquote, commandos and Rangers.
So you're talking about the 5307
composite, yeah.
All right. So I was right, technically.
Common Core, you got it right.
You
got it right. Common Core rules. You got it close to right. All right, next question.
Stressful.
That was for me, man.
Man, I was like, did I miss something in the Ranger history department?
You're good.
All right, next question. I think you're a sniper. I've been a sniper. Where does that term come from?
Oh my goodness
It
gracious!
has to do with the bird.
Yes. You just helped him out.
That's fine. I don't know the answer. I'm guessing.
You just gave the answer.
I don't know the answer
Contextually, you
because
should be able to come up with it.
So BK just gave you the answer. So Common Core rules, you get it right. So
You're welcome.
the bird, the snipe.
snipe.
It was a sport to hunt snipes. Snipes were very difficult to hunt. So anyone who could shoot a snipe was considered a superb and expert marksman. So someone who could shoot that well was considered a sniper.
Steve,
So-
when we're in Ohio, we need to drink whiskey together and
Oh, hell yeah.
talk about history.
Oh yeah, I'm down. I drive BK crazy with this shit. Your last question.
It's
All right,
not
last
long.
question. This one's pretty. Well, for me, it's pretty easy. Rangers. Now they're Rangers. Okay, World War II. All right, they are Rangers. What significant operation did the Rangers participate in the Pacific Theater, not the Atlantic Theater, that they're known for?
World War II.
I just said World War II. I just
that'd
did the
be
Pacific Theater.
the
So I'll narrow it down.
The Michna raid.
There you go. The POW rescue in the Philippines. So
Hold on a second. That is not the most. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to
not
disagree
most,
with you on
but
that one.
I said Pacific
That is
Theater,
the
World War II.
But
Pacific
the
Theater.
Michna raid is still the Pacific. That was in Burma. It's
yes.
still considered the Pacific Theater.
Yes. So I gave it to you.
All
But
right.
I was looking for the rescue of the final captives of the Bataan Death March when they invaded the
Right,
Philippines.
in the Philippines. Yeah, that was one of the last. That was the 6th Ranger Battalion that conducted that one. Right.
Yes,
there.
and for those of you who don't know, they made a movie on it called The Great Raid.
Right.
Hold on,
That
Sean.
was yes.
How many Ranger battalions are there? I thought there were 3 battalions plus a 4th support battalion.
No, there's only 3 battalions right now.
Okay.
And then you have STB. No, it's not a support battalion. STB is a special troops battalion.
Okay, sorry.
So that's Recce and some of our other special guys. But in World War II, we got up to 6 battalions. So post World War II, they shut them all down. They deactivated everybody. Korea, they activated the companies, and then Vietnam, the companies were reactivated and then deactivated in 1974. But then they established 1st and 2nd Battalion.
Correct. So you got it. You win. You're good. You survived unscathed.
That was a
Man,
stressful time,
I
man.
was waiting for my phone to start blowing up from all my.
Hey, we'll get together in Ohio. We'll definitely get together in Ohio.
Awesome.
This has been a long time in the making. We've been talking about having you on for the past few weeks, and I know you've been busy and we've been busy. So I appreciate you making the time and hanging out with us. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in Ohio. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
It was a good one.
Hey, if you remember, Sean, XL, medium, bring a comida chingada shirt to Ohio.
All
I'll
right,
be
you
there
guys
too.
go.
Medium.
All right.
Oh yeah, Paul's gonna be there too. But he's like our eye candy. He's just trophy.
He
Off
shares,
to a flame.
he shares a bed with Steve, and he's to get a small spoon.
It's not awkward at all.
All right, I'll hook you guys up.
Sean, it was a pleasure. I can't wait to
Okay.
follow up with you in Ohio.
All right, man.
Good
See you
night,
guys. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the Silver Savage podcast. Please go ahead and give our podcast a like, share the link with a friend, and help us spread the word. You can follow us on social media as well. Instagram handle is silver_savage45. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel where you can watch all these episodes videos as well. More unique content, merchandising, and events are coming soon too, so make sure to follow.